I want you to want me. I need you to need me. I'm begging you to beg me. And I want you now. Yeah, I want you.
You're listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, we are discussing I Want You to Vant Me, track 12 on the original 1993 edition of How to Clean Everything, and track 15 on the 2013 reissue. This is a cover of Cheap Trick's I Want You to Want Me from their 1977 album In Color. And I found a 2006 Sputnik music review written by someone named Pete that states, after the last real song, the boys managed to squeeze in yet another joke song with a cover of Cheap Trick's I Want You to Want Me, clearly retitled I Want You to Vant Me, in a classic skatecore manner, and leading that into 7 tracks of the members saying the word fuck a bunch of times. Whether or not this is meant to further cement their urgent message is still unclear to me.
Nice. I found another one from Punk News that written by someone named Greg, who isn't me, by the way, in 2013, I guess around the time of the reissue, that says, I Want You to Vant Me, an obvious cover retitled to get around copyright, perhaps, is fucking fantastic and another good breather from the serious stuff. They do so much with the song and take it in a bunch of different directions, ending with a silly a cappella coda about a girl named Megan and then a bunch of fucks to end the album. So, this is all really interesting stuff to me. This last track has like different parts, right? It's got the song, it's got the Megan vegan don't eat bacon part, and then it's got the fuck. So there's like a sectioned off approach to this track. But I went back recently, I listened to a portion of Chris's episode on Haile Selassie on his Patreon.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know when the last time you listened to that was, but it's awesome because in there he talks at length about the novelty tracks on this record and how they were all Fat Mike's idea. And, it seems like a large part of Mike's contribution to the record seems to have been related to the novelty tracks. And Chris states that Mike was right and that adding those F words at the end and and the joke songs kind of made the record more popular, I guess. So Chris was talking about ways that Mike, pushed the record in a couple specific directions because he was paying for it and it was their first record and they were pretty inexperienced at the time. But how Chris looks back on that time now. So Chris has a very long section in that Haile Selassie Patreon episode where he talks about the approach of this record. And, I was thinking about that review that you just read from Sputnik. And I was like, what if the track before I Want You to Want Me was the album closer and I Want You to Want Me wasn't on the record? And it would be Who Will Help Me Bake This Bread, which would have been a pretty wild and pretty sufficient album closer. So that was an interesting thought experiment that I had about, closing the record with an original instead of this one, because Propaganda in every other record is so well known for their album closers. So this is kind of an interesting one. But this song was recently featured on a podcast episode that friend of the podcast, Dwayne Larson, the photographer in Winnipeg, sent me, where he sent me an episode of Alan Cross's ongoing History of New Music podcast. And he did an episode called 14 Important Canadian Punk Bands, which was released on January 19th, 2022. And out of all the songs that Alan Cross could have chosen to highlight propaganda to his audience, he went with I Want You to Vant Me from How to Clean Everything. So anyway, so this song's got a few little sprinkled references out there as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, Greg. You mentioned the podcast episode. I have not heard that. I think probably since it first came out, I've not re-listened to that one. But that detail you shared is what I probably remember the most, aside from the discussions of the Bad Brains. about the artistic control in a way. There being a lot of strings pulled outside of the band's hands, and that like the either marketing or the format and the final song choice not necessarily being what the band would have selected on their own. And for me, as someone coming in listening to them, starting listening to them in 2003 with Today's Empires being the first record, I mean, it's a big outlier for me. Like, it doesn't really feel like the same band. It seems like either I would have thought, wow, these musicians really matured a lot in the last couple years, or there was like this attempt to make like a square peg fit into a round hole, and it just didn't necessarily work. So that's that thought comes to mind from that podcast episode. All right, so this song, of course, was composed and performed originally by Cheap Trick. It is originally track 4 on the album In Color that was released in September of 1977. It was the first single released from that album, but it did not chart in the US. 19 months later, a live version from the band's successful Cheap Trick at Budokan album was released as a single and became one of their biggest hits, peaking at number 7 in the US, number 2 in Canada, and number 1 in Japan. And it has since become Cheap Trick's signature song, and Rick Nielsen is credited as being the songwriter on that tune.
Interestingly, some of our Twitter followers noticed that I commented on Rick Nielsen's Twitter page once a couple months ago. I went to his latest tweet, and I think I was the only reply, and I wrote, "Hi, Rick, do you like Propaganda?" I was trying to capture his attention for obvious reasons, and a few of our listeners noticed what I was up to, and they were like adding those little eyeball emojis, like looking at my tweet. And I was unsuccessul in getting Rick Nielsen to respond if he likes Propaganda. So I did my best, but my best was insufficient in this moment. But I went back and I listened to the original version from In Color, and I didn't really care for it all that much. It's a very small sound of song. It's a very 1970s recording. But what was interesting is I found out that apparently Cheap Trick agreed, because they asked Steve Albini to re-record it in 1977 or in 1997. Sorry. So in 1997, Steve Albini re-recorded Cheap Trick's I Want You to Want Me with them. And, they're both in Chicago. So it's kind of like a hometown situation there. But the At Budokan version is pretty fun. But, thinking about the cover by Propaganda, I was like, who else has covered this song? So I went and I found covers of this song by Dwight Yoakam, Lindsay Lohan, Chris Isaak, and this is the most exciting one, another former guest of this podcast named Chris Fafalius, who appeared on our Fuck Machine episode, plays in a band called Punchline, and they covered I Want You to Want Me on their Nice to Meet You 2012 EP, which came out on Modern Short Stories Records. And so there's quite a little wild connection there, because I can't really recall if Chris mentioned that when I interviewed him for Fuck Machine. I wonder if he did and I forgot, or if he forgot, or if he remembered and he intentionally omitted it. But Punchline's version is awesome because Steve from Punchline is a great singer. So I sent Chris from Punchline an email and I asked him about Punchline's cover. And I said, I am very curious about your thoughts on that. You've both covered this song, Punchline and Propaganda. And I asked him to comment for the record. And here's what Chris Fafalius from Punchline had to say in his response to me. I was obviously well aware of Propaganda's cover when we recorded ours in late 2011. I'd normally avoid doing a cover of a song that has already been done by a band in our world, especially a band that I love. But there was a very weird reason we did it. we were on a Howie Mandel television show where they flew us out to LA, where we thought we were going to get to play our song Universe, which was just about to be released and is on the same EP as I Want You to Want Me. When we got there, we were disappointed to learn that we instead had to play the cover. Not that we don't like the song, but because we thought we were going to get to play our own original song. So we tried to make lemonade out of lemons, rented a practice space in LA, and made sure we played that song to the very best of our abilities. I think our version of it is a lot different than Propagandy's, at least, because we put so much time and effort into learning it and doing a cool cover of it. We basically said, fuck it, let's record it, and included it on our EP that came out shortly after. I remember at some point in the past 10 years, AP Magazine, Alternative Press, posted something where people voted on who did the cover better between us and Propagandy as part of some series where they were doing that. I remember thinking, oh my God, I can't believe they put us up against Propagandy for a myriad of reasons. So anyway, that's my story. Propagandy definitely beat us to the punch by almost a couple of decades on covering that. But to be fair, I'm sure that song has been covered to death by everyone. I like the Letters to Cleo version. So thank you so much to Chris Fafalius from Punchline for humoring me and replying to my goofy email about I Want You to Want Me in such great depth. So I appreciated that email a whole heck of a lot. So hey to Chris and hey to Punchline. Go check out their version too.
Yeah, very cool.
Keith, are you a Cheap Trick fan?
Not really. I guess I know this song and I've heard it so much. I don't want to hear it again, like the original or the live version or a cover version. I know Surrender. So maybe it's just victim of a band that is associated with just a handful of tunes and I should explore something else. But if I had to say based off of those two songs, it's not necessarily my cup of tea.
Gotcha. I'm pretty much in the same boat as you on that. I remember gaining an appreciation for them in that Foo Fighters television series that came out several years ago called Sonic Highways, which was on HBO. And in that series, their first episode takes place in Chicago. And Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick and Steve Albini from Shellac and Big Black make many appearances in that episode. So that was kind of one of the ways where I started to gain a little bit more of an appreciation for what Cheap Trick had done and like why they matter to the city of Chicago. So that's kind of a cool reference if people want to go and see a little bit about Cheap Trick in like a nicely polished television series kind of approach that Foo Fighters did a few years ago. But one last little thing I found through the grapevine, I think Jamie Fougere, who does so much art for us, sent me a video that he found, and he found an interview with Fat Mike in the Punk Voter era, I think in 2002, where he was talking to Nardwar on a show called Going Coastal on Much Music, and the Propagandy Fat Canada Cheap Trick connection comes up. So check this out real quick.
Surrender. What's the connection between Fat Mike Winnipeg and Cheap Trick?
Okay, the reason the band I'm most proud to have on Fat Records actually is Propagandy, because I think they're rad dudes and they stand for a lot, and they're great. And I watched them play one night. They opened for NoFX, Propagandy did, and I saw a few songs like, oh, these guys are pretty good. And then they played Surrender by Cheap Trick, and they got the harmonies all right, and I go, I'm signing this band.
I don't really know why Fat Mike says surrender on that interview. But that was really cool to hear Fat Mike talking in 2002 about how much he digs Propagandy and how they're really awesome. So one more thing before we dive in here with our guest, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Chris Hanna for his very kind words about the podcast on his recent Tartuffe episode over at Catastrophic Break with Consensus Reality. And I would like to take this moment to publicly retract my theory about the opening line of Tartuffe being an homage to Saxon. So I was 100% wrong on that. And in the moment, I thought I was 100% correct. I thought I had nailed that.
I was convinced.
Oh man. And Chris's explanation of that on his Tartuffe episode was so funny. So just a reminder, everybody, Chris is the Mars rover on the surface, and I am the guy looking through the telescope, theorizing and hypothesizing and often speculating. So I loved the episode, but that was an amazing moment for me, hearing Chris talk so kindly about the podcast. And he and Beeve had me laughing so hard. And it was just a monumentally joyful moment for me. And their fact checking really made me just so happy. And I was like driving down the road here in Buffalo, just like crying and laughing so hard. But I know that Chris will never hear this because we are doing an episode about a song that he almost certainly despises. But I just wanted to say thanks to Chris, and that Tartuffe episode meant the world to me. So yeah, that's all I got to say on that.
That's awesome. And I have not been able to listen to it yet. So I think holding off for a rainy day based off your messages, your reminders, your feedback here and elsewhere about that episode. I'm really looking forward to it when I could really sit down and take it in. So, Greg, let's get to our first guest.
So our first guest is very exciting for me, is Rory Phillips. Depending on the listener's musical tastes, many listeners will likely know Rory as a member of the Impossibles and the Stereo, both from Fueled by Ramen Records. I was personally a huge fan of the Impossibles and their Impossibles Return record that they did after reuniting from a breakup. But they're also remembered as sort of being like a ska punk band, but I got into them when they were more of a rock band on their Return album. But Rory's from Austin, Texas, where the Impossibles opened for Propaganda years back, which we discuss in this interview. And just to give a couple of shout outs to something that Rory is doing right now, which is awesome, is Rory is the host of a podcast series called The Kings of No Hope, which is an audio documentary documenting the story of his band, The Stereo, which he co-founded with Jamie Walford from Animal Chin. So I'm 3 episodes into that podcast right now, and it is really great. So, and you should absolutely go check it out if you were ever a fan of the Impossibles or the Stereo, or just want to check out some great rock tunes. So Rory joined me graciously after I connected with him through our friends over at the In Defense of Ska podcast. And so Rory is here to talk with me about his thoughts on Propaganda, the Impossibles, and I Want You to Want Me. So check it out. Rory Phillips, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propaganda.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really stoked to be here.
I'm delighted, Rory. If you can just spend a moment and sort of introduce yourself to the audience a little bit, however you see fit, because there may be people out there who have never heard your work, and they may be hearing about you for the first time right now.
Yeah, so I'm Rory Phillips. I am a singer and a guitarist. I was a founding member of a band called The Impossibles. Also later was in a band called The Stereo. Both of those bands were early Fueled by Ramen bands. So Fueled by Ramen went on to great heights, but we were in on the ground floor with that label. Most recently, I've created a podcast called Kings of No Hope, the story of the Stereo. It's available on all platforms now. It should be available where you're listening to this. And really the reason for making that podcast is, even though I was in the Stereo in the beginning, I was kicked out pretty early on. Spoiler alert there for the podcast. And so there was a lot of their story that I didn't know, but I did know it was dramatic, and I knew that it was probably going to be compelling. And I think what we came up with kind of supports that. But that band was started with a man called Jamie Wolford, who was previously in a band called Animal Chin, who I think were a lot closer to Propaganda than anything else in our scene coming up at the time. And so they were sort of a way for me to bridge some of what we were doing with some of what I was listening to, and really respecting and admiring coming out from Propaganda. And I also I think it's kind of interesting because Propaganda has this history where they started off with the two singing styles and the kind of duality piece, but it still exists today. It's just it's different. And then that changed, and that happened with our band as well. So I think even if you've never heard of the Stereo, sort of the drama and the backstory of what happened there is still something that you might find compelling.
Awesome. Well, tell me a little bit about the structure of that podcast, because I know you're doing it sort of like a standalone miniseries, right?
Yeah, it's 5 episodes, and it's kind of audio documentary style, along the lines of something like Serial or S-Town. I when I listen to podcasts, I listen to a lot of conversational stuff like this. But when it came time to make one, what I really gravitated towards was that ability to try and craft, almost an audio movie around what the band was.
Yeah, I'm listening to that Trojan Horse Affair right now, which is a really cool sort of like audio drama documentary like that. So I'm totally with you on that style, which I think is why I'm liking your podcast so much. I'm on episode 2 right now, so everybody definitely check that out. Okay, so I want to know a little bit about your background and like a little bit about your discovery of underground music. Did you grow up in Texas?
I did. I grew up in Austin, Texas. We were the Impossibles from Austin, Texas. Anybody who knows the band will know that we like to bring that up as often as possible. Growing up in Austin, basically in high school, I was in sort of a risk youth program for kids that were in danger of dropping out. We went to a place called Robbins, and at Robbins, I met a guy named Brian Tweedy, who completely changed my life. And I owe everything to Brian. He introduced me to Green Day and Operation Ivy, which was super foundational for me. And through getting into that music, started going to shows. Really, my introduction to Propagandhi and that whole side of things came through going to a NoFX show at Liberty Lunch. And I think this is probably the origin story for a lot of folks with Propagandhi, is going to that NoFX show, finding out that they were giving out a free sampler, which unheard of at the time. Like, here is a whole CD of music that you can just have. And so they were actually hard to find at the show. I think they were trying to limit the amount that they were giving away, but I did manage to come away with one of the Fat Music for Fat People compilations, the first one. And it was incredible. Like, comps were around. It was starting to kind of pick up as a way for music to get distributed, but to have a comp that was bangers, like start to finish, and to start off with Anti-Manifesto, such a incredible song, that was really huge, and opened up, I think, a whole other piece of the scene, and it was so easy to sort of slide into Lagwagon and No Use for a Name and in Bracket,
totally.
Bands that maybe weren't even strictly adhering to the sort of style of the rest of the bands on that label.
Nice. Oh, so Anti-Manifesto was the first Propagandhi song that you ever heard?
Yeah, definitely. And incredible. I mean, what a way to open up that compilation. And I think it was, really interesting how they, there was that thread through all of the bands on that comp, but Propagandhi still found a way to really stand out. And they definitely had their element that they were bringing to the table that no one else was even coming close to touching, that made it more engaging and led it to be the reason that I got How to Clean Everything as my first Fat Records, full length off of that comp and initial discovery.
That's awesome. Did you mail order? Or did you have to go track it down in person? How did you come across that How to Clean Everything record?
We had a really great record store on the Drag in Austin. The Drag is the area that's right across from the University of Texas. I'm super lucky to have grown up in Austin, by the way.
Yeah, because, amazing city.
Yeah, having the university there, it is both a magnet for outsiders to come in and make Austin more of sort of a melting pot. but then also you just get things like record stores that, some people in some towns in Texas, there was no such thing as a record store that would carry Fat Records. But Sound Exchange on Guadalupe Street had that record, and any other record I wanted, and local bands self-release stuff available as well, which was really incredible.
Yeah, my version of that was a vintage vinyl in St. Louis on the Del Mar Loop, kind of like by the Pageant and Blueberry Hill. I know that maybe that's a place that that you've come across in your years of touring, especially like through St. Louis and stuff. I've seen the Impossibles in 2000 on your return tour at the Creepy Crawl, which I don't know if that if that rings a bell for you.
Oh, 100%. Not probably for the reason that you would want it to, because that's the show where you remember those giant books of CDs, where it's like a binder style thing, and all of your cases were in a cardboard box at home, but all of your CDs were in this giant binder. All of our music got stolen.
Oh.
Someone took the antenna from our van and like bent it in to be able to use it to hit the button to make the automatic door unlock.
Oh my
God.
God.
And then just took off. It was, I mean, gut wrenching. If you can imagine.
Is that it?
That was really it. Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
That was probably the only thing of value in there, because it was while we were playing. So all of our equipment was in the club, thankfully. That obviously could have been worse. But at a time where the access to music was so limited, I mean, that was, like I said, just devastating.
Oh, well, yay for my hometown.
But I love St. Louis. St. Louis gave us ME330. So,
yeah,
it offsets 1,000%.
That was my favorite local band for years and years. And we were so lucky because we would see like early Alkaline Trio shows where Alkaline Trio would open up for MU330 and things like that. I mean, it was a pretty special little spot. If I look back on it at the time, we were like, why does every tour skip St. Louis? But instead of like appreciating the good things that I had, we were like, oh, Propagandy's not coming, or No Use for Names is not coming. Like, we got so bent out of shape about the smallest stuff back then, but that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
And I know that you've had there's another Austin, Texas alum or a resident on this that's been on this podcast recently. Kyle from The Sword was here recently, and I know that you heard that recently. So I'm grateful to you for checking out the podcast and joining me here today.
Yeah, it was fantastic listening to Kyle and having him talk about Santiago, who was the drummer for Recover, currently drummer for The Sword. I skipped that over in my bio for a while there. I was producing records, and one of the bands I got to work with was Recover.
Awesome.
An amazing band. And actually, part of my Propagandy story as well, but maybe we'll get to that a little later.
Well, let's get into this, because something that we saw very early on in the creation of this podcast is we did the song Ska Sucks ages ago.
Yeah.
Episode 12 or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but it's been a long time since we did that episode. And then we did a bonus episode with Aaron Carnes from the author of In Defense of Ska and the current co-host of the In Defense of Ska podcast, which he does with Adam Davis from Link 80 and Omnigon. But I know that you were recently on that podcast, which is kind of how we connected. And you mentioned opening up for Propagandy in Austin, Texas. And I thought that we originally thought it was 94, but I think we decided it was 96, correct?
Yeah, it was May 28th, 1996. I mean, what a huge moment. In a lot of ways, when I think back on it, I feel like it was sort of a tipping point for the band.
No. Well, play if some dumbass gets up and sings it. It's going to be a real dumbass. Okay, come on up. Come on up, dumbass. There's one. Realize this gives us the right to make ceaseless fun of you for the rest of the evening. Everyone can point at you and laugh. Uh-oh, it's an ukulele. Just laugh. Uh-oh. Chain of strength.
I'm all the way from San Diego, California.
Propaganda had booked a tour for Less Talk, More Rock. They hooked up with some promoters local to us, Sarah and Brian Deacle. I think they probably connected through Book Your Own Fucking Life would be my guess. Although Propaganda may have been kind of past that at that point. But I know that Brian and Sarah were, connected with that scene. They had put on a show at a place called Sunton Warehouse that was rancid and total chaos in a super small room. But I did get to see that they put on as well. They booked a show at a venue in Austin called the Voodoo Lounge that had just it was an up and coming all ages space. Liberty Lunch was the big all ages place in Austin, but then Voodoo Lounge was kind of trying to compete in that spot. And we hadn't put out a self-titled record yet. We had done some demo tapes, and we were kind of like the up and coming hometown heroes, like the band that I think you could throw onto a bill to be able to get a few more people out. But honestly, Propaganda was so big in our scene, it was never not going to be huge for them to be playing in Austin.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to know any minutia that you may remember about that show in particular, like if it was good or if it was a bad show for you guys, or how the crowd reacted, or how the crowd reacted to Propaganda, because this was a very confrontational period for that band. And I'm curious if they were like mouthy that night, or if it was like a relaxing or a pleasant evening. I'm just curious about any of your reflections on that night.
I gotta say, I really remember it as more of just a love fest. I totally know what you're talking about with Propaganda. Our scene was so keyed into what their vibe and what they were doing. Like the only other band I can think of at the time that had a similar sort of effect for us was Avail. Like Avail also just, for whatever reason, just clicked with what was going on in Austin. And there was a sizable scene there. The things I remember about the show, I mean, for one thing, they stayed at Gabe's house. So Gabe was the singer for the Impossibles. And at his parents' house over by campus, and so that was incredible. And I did get to kind of be around them outside of the show itself. I've always kind of taken the stance of not really engaging with my musical heroes when I see them. I was in a band called Slow Reader, and we were heavily influenced by Elliott Smith, and Elliott Smith was at one of our shows, and I could not go up and talk to him. Like for whatever reason, it's weird because people do that to me about some of the music that I made, and I'm 100% on board and very excited to talk to them. And these people would maybe be as well, but for whatever reason, it's just always been something I've kind of stayed away from. But I do remember talking to John Sampson briefly and trying to engage with him on sort of this idea of, isn't it upsetting that, you guys are playing this music and people just don't really get it and they don't get the message, and sort of this, I was a huge Nirvana fan. And so there was this, the song In Bloom is basically about that. Like, he knows not what it means. And so I was like really keyed into this idea of like, we're the ones who get it. And there's all these, dumb jocks that listen to the music as well that don't get it. And he just couldn't have seemed less interested to talk about it, which is really, I think in retrospect, I think it was just like probably a really worn out topic. They both in Anti-Manifesto and then, in the song Less Talk, More Rock, they address that sort of thing. And I do think it's something that was true and apparent, but I guess just like when you're hanging out at some kid's house, you're going to play a show the next day. It's not the sort of thing that you're like looking to engage in small talk on. And with John eventually no longer being in the band, maybe too, he was getting tired of just like getting into that sort of rhetoric around
Yeah.
what propaganda was doing. I don't
Well,
know.
and what's really interesting about that timing as well is you're talking about May of '96, and by December of '96, Todd Kowalski starts showing up in live videos on in Canadian tours. So like we're talking about the absolute bitter end of John Samson's presence within the band. So like you saw like one of the last opportunities.
Yeah. And I mean, gosh, so lucky. Like,
Yeah.
and Let's Talk More Rock is my favorite of their records. So the fact that my band got to open for them in our hometown on the tour for their greatest record, in my opinion. I know you're a big supporting cast fan, which by the way, I have now listened to, and it is amazing. Particularly like sonically is just undeniable, but also a really great record. The timing just could not have really been better. And the show, you're asking like what the response was like. I mean, it was great, and there is video evidence. We initially started talking about Ska Sucks, and that song in particular was filmed and is on YouTube. You can go and find it. And I think that kind of gives you a sense of what the vibe was like. And it was really more celebratory, maybe to the point of being a little dumb in a way that maybe was annoying to Chris, I think, in some respects. But overall, definitely not confrontational, definitely not like anyone looking to pick a fight because they wanted to hear, snowboarding music, and instead we're getting politics. It's like we were there for the politics. Like we were like stoked that they were doubling down with that record on that whole message.
So tell me a little bit about this Ska Sucks video, because Gabe it basically sings the whole song in his Impossible's jersey.
As far as Ska Sucks goes, we loved that song. Like we were in a ska band, but the whole point is that it's satirical and punk rock, and it's part of the whole tradition started by NoFX of having funny songs on your record. So we were into it, and it was more like talking ahead of time of like, want to be funny with us as a ska band opening for Propaganda if they play Ska Sucks. And I think in a way we probably almost wanted them to, and they definitely did not want to play that song.
Yeah, John Sampson's like, no.
Yeah. But the crowd was yelling for it, and they were going off, and like you said, it got shut down but then Chris opts to offer to play it if someone, he says something like, if some dumbass comes up and sings it. And so of course Gabe is like, yes, I want to be that dumbass. Like I was in the ska band that opened. I'm wearing a shirt that has Impossible across the front, so there's no like no way that anyone's going to think, oh, this is just some other punk kid. This is clearly the singer from the ska band that was playing earlier, getting on stage. And I think we all I love that conceptually still, just the whole idea that everyone was sort of celebrating this dumb song that the band didn't really want to play or like, but, offered up this opportunity for us to make this very ironic sort of theater piece out of it. And so Gabe was like first one up there. He's, like you said, singing through the whole thing. In the video, John Samson, I think, looks pretty amused by the whole thing, which makes me, happy. Eventually they get way too many people on stage, and it just gets, kind of silly. And then some guy takes over the mic at the end, which I don't remember, but is like, that's like the cringy tipping point that it often got to with those sort of like, indie shows, was the person who then starts to try and make themselves the center of attention.
Whenever I reached out to you, you were very enthusiastic about doing the podcast, which I was really grateful for. But you also mentioned that, maybe there were some other songs that you would have picked if we hadn't already done those episodes. And I'm curious about just like some of your other favorite stuff and anything that you wanted to mention for other songs that maybe we've already covered in other episodes.
Yeah, I think I mentioned, Let's Talk More Rock was my favorite album. And then the song Let's Talk More Rock is my favorite song. It's just, for me, it's got all those elements of kind of like catharsis behind the lyrical content that gets into like the details of it, and like it, it's just full on, flashing a light on it and really exposing it for the listener. I love that element of Propaganda. It's got awesome, really hooky guitar riff stuff. It was kind of just the balance of all of the elements of things that I really loved from the band. And so, yeah, so that was a big one for me. But, How to Clean Everything was like just a seismic event for me and for everyone else, all my friends that were listening to that music and trying to start making that sort of music at the time. They really had, again, sort of found their way to stand out from the Fat Wreck bands. It still had some of those elements of bringing in the sort of no effects, sort of jokey songs. I think for me, like the fact that Ska Sucks is track 5, I'm so like, I want to be in the room where they're like deciding that track listing.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that is why How to Clean Everything leans more towards a like no effects record, and where Let's Talk More Rock is like, no, actually Propaganda is a whole different thing, and here's what it is. And so that's where it like really clicked for me to have, not only is this reminiscent of other things that I'm listening to, but they found a way to differentiate themselves and become really something in their own right.
You brought up something interesting now. It's about sequencing, and you've sequenced records in your own
Sure.
bands and everything. And so an early version of Less Talk More Rock that Chris has talked about on his podcast is that they originally were going to open Less Talk More Rock with the song Less Talk More Rock.
Yeah, it would have been a great opener.
Yeah, how do you feel about that? Do you think it would have been as effective as the opener as Apparently I'm a PC Fascist?
I think so, 1,000%, just because it's such a declaration of what the record is. I get it though, as like you said, someone who sequences stuff, sometimes a song just feels more like an opener, and then sometimes you want people to settle in a little bit before they get like the one that is the real message that you want them to take away from it. So it's hard for me to say. I mean, I will totally admit though, a lot of times when I go to listen to Let's Talk More Rock, I start with Let's Talk More Rock as sort of the song, and then maybe like jump around a little bit from there.
Cool. Well, I'm glad I was able to give you the opportunity to talk about some of your other favorite stuff, because we've done so many songs, and like now when I send out the song list of potential guests, it's like, you already did all my favorite songs. And I'm like, sorry. That's why I always give the opportunity to comment on other stuff as well. But what I want to do now is hone in on the song for this particular episode, which is I Want You to Want Me, their cover of Cheap Trick. And I want to know about your memories of this song and what made this sort of a standout track for you and an outlier almost to appear on the podcast.
Yeah. And I think for me, when in looking at the list that you provided, I Want You to Want Me seemed like a perfect fit because it's uncool. And listening to your podcast, a lot of people, it's kind of like if I was going on a Star Wars podcast, and I knew that the hosts and all previous guests had encyclopedic knowledge of Star Wars. And I was coming on, I was like, man, I loved back in 77. Like I saw Star Wars like 7 times. It was fantastic. Like that's kind of like how my love for Propaganda feels when I'm talking to people who have real knowledge of the band. And, everything post Today's Empire is Tomorrow's Ashes, which I mentioned it briefly earlier, but like that was sort of like the shift point, and where I just stopped kind of getting it. But what was interesting is Recover, another band from Austin that I worked with and produced music for. They loved that record and liked it more than the previous. They were like, I don't even care about How to Clean Everything or Let's Talk More Rock. Give me Today's Empire is Tomorrow's Ashes. So yeah, I think in a way that probably worked exactly like Propaganda would hope for it to, because they were a lot more dialed in as well. And so I think they did find that way to click with the audience that it really, really spoke to. But so for trying to pick a song, I thought it would be appropriate to go with I Want You to Want Me, being, again, the guy without the encyclopedic knowledge, the guy who started off with being in a ska band. Like Ska Sucks is like my big Propaganda story. So let's do a song that is not, one that is particularly considered a cool pick or a cherished one. But I did legitimately love the song, and really the weirdest part about it in retrospect is I didn't know it was a cover
Nice.
for years. And I mean, it's really, the thing is that music in general was not very accessible to me. Like I grew up, my family, we were definitely not impoverished, but we didn't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have a record collection.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even really listen to the radio that much. So, I think there's probably pros and cons to that. Like, when you're trying to start making music, if you either have a really deep knowledge of music, or if you kind of have like no knowledge of music, either of those can kind of help affect the way that that you start creating in positive and negative ways. But so Cheap Trick was just like a total blind spot. I could remember they did a cover of Don't Be Cruel in 1988. I looked up where the drummer dressed up like Elvis at the end of it. And that was it. Like, I do remember that, like, coming on MTV. But other than that, I didn't have any sort of tie to them. And what I found later is that I think Cheap Trick did have a tie to the punk scene, and then especially like the poppy punk scene, where people were sort of seeing like, okay, if you take that and then ratchet up the aggression, 25%, then you can get towards things like Green Day and get further into it. But for me, they weren't that sort of foundational thing. So for me, I just thought Propaganda wrote this, amazing hooky poppy song that ultimately degenerates into all sorts of expletives and things of that nature. But yeah, it's like there was this, and then the other big touch point that I didn't get was Pinhead Gunpowder, which was like Billy Joe's great band. They had a sample from Surrender for their song Losers of the Year. And
Nice.
that was another one where I was just like, oh, this is cool. It's got to be from some old record. I have no idea what it is, and I'll probably never know. It must be so obscure. Of course, it's Cheap Trick with like their biggest hit that has probably sold, 20 million records.
I love when people mention their musical blind spots on here. Keith and I from this podcast have a very notable moment where we overlooked a Billy Bragg cover song on this podcast, and we've gotten to date, about 250 emails about the Billy Bragg thing. So I love moments like that, and it just makes me chuckle. But I'm curious if you can tell me a little bit about your thoughts on the musical and vocal performance on this cover and what stands out. Like, any tiny observations are totally welcome.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it felt like a left turn for them, but it was on a record full of left turns. Like, there was so many, like, the next Propaganda record could have been anything based off of that first one. And so, it felt different. Like, listening to it now, I love the sort of like loose Fat Wreck version that is How to Clean Everything. Like, Let's Talk More Rock is just tight as a drum and amazing. How to Clean Everything has more of that early Fat Wreck sort of sloppiness, and I think this song in particular kind of stands out to me. Like, the bass and drums are a little all over the place at moments, and in like a really great way that just kind of adds to the whole deal. To me, it sounds like Chris is trying to be like particularly snotty and shitty, and I imagine, although this is obviously me projecting onto him really heavily, I imagine that they probably didn't even want to do that cover. It's like, it's kind of not really in line with most of the things that they do. And one of the things that also is really interesting to me now that I can listen to Cheap Trick, because you can get any music anywhere, he flip-flops the shirts and shoes line in a way that's really, it's the reason it's interesting to me is that the Cheap Trick version, one of my favorite melodic moments is he's like, get a brand new shirt. He does this like weird sort of like scoop on it, and that is it's not only missing from the Propaganda version, but he actually like flips the shoes and shirt line. So the shirt reference is first, the shoes reference is second. So there's like zero way that it could have even been part of it. And I don't know if that's symptomatic of them, maybe not even wanting to listen to the song before they did it, because they just want to do it off of memory and have it. And it really is like this whole other thing. Like if you listen to the two songs, it's like Propaganda took some of the best elements from the Cheap Trick song, recreated them, but then also created this whole other structure to the song and left out a lot of the really kind of self-indulgent parts of it, where it just kind of keeps going and going.
Nice. What do you think about the Megan the vegan part, where they say Megan the vegan?
Yeah.
They like, it's funny. What do you think about that?
I didn't get it at the time. I mean, it's so really. So I was vegetarian at the time, and vegetarianism was very prevalent in the Austin scene. Veganism had not really landed, or just kind of speaking for myself, like my awareness of veganism wasn't really there. But then you add in the fact that they say vegan, and and it was just completely off the table. It was like then I'm just really kind of clueless. I obviously understood the whole like she don't eat bacon. I got I had the context clues to try and put it together, but I ultimately didn't know what it was. And I remember there was sort of like the scene rumors, or like the scene talk about bands that you liked and stuff. Everybody had kind of settled on Propaganda being ovo-lacto vegetarians. Like they had like an early shirt or something that someone had seen. At least that was like the the thing that was passed around. And so I didn't know that they were vegans and advocating for veganism and stuff. And so it was sort of lost on me at the time, at least like the direct reference to veganism.
Nice. What do you think about the fuck outro? How do you feel about that?
I mean, it's super indicative of the way that 90s CDs ended. It was like during the time of hidden tracks and throwing, Green Day had All By Myself thrown onto the end of Dookie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there was just this, and so that's kind of what I chalked it up to, was just having fun in the studio and then throwing some kind of garbage at the end of the record. I also, one thing that had never really stood out to me at the time is the Chris Hanna self-censored line in I Want You to Want Me, where he's like, boop, I want you to boop, want me, or whatever. For some reason, that never clicked with me. And so I wonder now if that's supposed to be some sort of response or call and response almost to it. Like, we're going to fake you out by telling you or by indicating to you that we're not going to say fuck in this song. And then boy, howdy, are we going to say fuck in this song.
I love that.
As much as possible at the very end of it. There was that No Effects song, Please Play This Song on the Radio.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's a connection there, where it's like, this is something that K-Rock will probably want to play. It's an old hit song now being redone punk style. So let's trick them into playing it, and then let's put as many fucks at the end of it as possible. So if they accidentally play it, maybe 5 or 6 will slip out before they can stop it.
That is such an interesting observation and theory, which I really like, because I've never really even thought about it like that, because it really could have been a K-Rock connection. That's Oh, I love that. Well, thank you for that. That's a great theory. That's wonderful.
I'm trying to bring some deep analysis to a very silly song.
I am here for it. You're elevating the conversation here. This is wonderful, because what you're also helping me do is you're helping me appreciate the song more, because I've openly ripped on this song on the podcast many times, and now that I keep listening to it, I'm like, oh my God, it actually freaking rocks really hard. So I'm like coming around on this song like a lot the last couple of weeks. So I'm like, okay, fine. Okay, so Rory, to bring this in kind of for a landing here, I'm wondering if you can just, explain a little bit about what this band means to you as a person who has spent the bulk of your career making music and playing in front of audience, but also as a person who just generally cares about the world as
Sure.
we have it?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think of Propagandhi in the same class as Fugazi.
Mhm.
They're like untouchable, incredible, amazing artists that it feel like gods walking the earth in some
Yeah.
ways. Not to completely overblow it, but you know, that's where they live in my mind, and I respect them so much. They were so ahead of the curve, and you know, talking about things that other people were just not talking about at the time, and it's incredible to see the curve of culture kind of come closer to them. Of course, there are extremes that are getting even further away, but you know, from my perspective, it feels like progress, and it feels like Propagandhi was, you know, helping to lead the charge in the right direction, which is you know, so valuable. I respect them so much. I can't imagine being them as an artist, you know, for better or worse. Like it's just, I've never had that intense tie between uh, uh, those views, those feelings, um, and bringing that into music. It hasn't been something for me, but like I said, it's just something that I admire so much. And when I think about, you know, my kind of stupid pop culture way of thinking about politics is, I think that there are kind of two camps. I think there are people who want to push towards Star Trek, and there are people who want to push towards Mad Max. Either you're looking for progression towards bringing us all together, and equality, or everyone's out for themselves and we're all killing each other for gasoline, right? And so when I think about it that way, Propagandhi, I think of as squarely pushing in the right direction for progress. But I also think, you know, when it comes to things like animal liberation, I really think that they're on the right side of history. Like, I think eventually it will be just like when they were talking about being gay positive with Less Talk, More Rock at a time where no one else was doing that. I think there's a through line there where the things that they're talking about now are eventually going to seem more obvious to everybody. And so I'm thankful for them. And you know, I hope it doesn't sound condescending in any way, because that's like the main thing that I you know, you worry about I worry about as a middle-aged man who listened to Propaganda in my youth, is like, oh my God, have I become the thing that, that I hated and abhorred as a younger man? And I hope not. But at minimum, I think of them as just such a positive influence in so many ways, and really appreciate what they do.
Yeah, you know, and I'm thinking about your upbringing in Texas and my upbringing in Missouri.
Mhm.
And both of these are places that make the news in our country for many of the wrong reasons.
Sure.
And so I acknowledge that finding Propaganda when I did in Missouri was incredibly important for taking a turn for my own world views. And I mean, it sounds like you kind of feel the same way.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of people's thinking would have stayed squarely down the middle of the track that they were on if they had never been exposed to something like Propaganda. And maybe folks didn't get all the way in line with the ideals, but even understanding that there are other ways to think, and even knowing that there is something outside of your sort of blinders and what you can see directly in front of you. I mean, I think that's really huge. And I hope they feel good about what they've done in the world as a band and as artists and as musicians.
Well, Rory, I am super grateful to you for your time and this fabulous conversation. And I just want you to tell everybody what projects they can search for after hearing you now. So tell them all your stuff again.
Sure. So Kings of No Hope is a podcast that I created. It's kind of an audio documentary style tale of a band that had trials and tribulations and triumphs. And I think you'll find it engaging, even if you've never heard of the band The Stereo. If you have heard of the band The Stereo, then you'll get an inside peek into some of the drama that you may have heard about back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and really get the inside track on it. That's the main thing. And then The Stereo is also putting out a new record. We just did a fabulously successful Kickstarter for that, which I am still completely blown away by.
Amazing.
Yeah, so we're going to get to press that record on vinyl, which was not always a foregone conclusion.
Yeah.
Folks are going to get it, and we're going to be able to share all sorts of fun goodies with folks that were able to help us out with that. So yeah, more of that music is coming out every couple of weeks. You can go to thestereorock.com to get any details on that. And then kingsofnohope.com is where you can find all the links to my podcast.
Awesome. Rory Phillips, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you so much to Rory Phillips. Just a reminder, Rory is in the Impossibles and the Stereo, both great bands. He's also the Kings of No Hope podcasts, which is awesome, and I'm enjoying. And we talked about during the episode, so definitely be sure to go scope that out.
All right, Greg. Well, we have a second guest, I know, and this is really cool because this person has appeared before on the show, but not in an interview. So fill us in.
So our second guest is Lang Huck, and guests or listeners will remember Lang from the cover versions that he has submitted to the podcast for Devil's Creek, a speculative fiction, and his vocal cover that he did for This Is Your Life. Lang lives just outside of St. Louis, very close to my the hometown that I grew up in Missouri. He's been a huge supporter of the podcast for a long time, and it was a pleasure to chat with him about his covers, his love of propaganda, and his thoughts on I Want You to Want Me. And he's got some good theories on it too. So you can find Lang's propaganda covers as downloadable files at doublehelldethmatch.bandcamp.com. And you can find his release called How to Ruin a Couple of Things. So that's where you can find Lang. So please enjoy my conversation with Lang Huck.
Didn't I see it crying? Didn't I see it crying? Sitting alone, I know you felt like dying.
Lang Huck, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm delighted to have you here, Lang, because you're a long time, social media conversationalist with me, but also a multiple song contributor to the podcast. And so let's go ahead and start off with your musical project. Tell me a little bit about what you have going on as a musician in your own personal life.
Okay. Basically it's called Double Hell Deathmatch.
Mm-hmm.
It started as, it was like, I guess, a pandemic project.
Yeah.
It was like, we got everything moved over here into the house finally, out of storage, get back into doing music, writing songs, whatever. So it started as like trying to do one thing per month.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it was, actual songs with like verses and choruses and stuff. And some of it was covers recorded on my phone and, 20 seconds of screaming, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's all different.
Excellent. So what is your sound? Can you sort of describe to the listeners, kind of what kind of music you make with your project? Because I always get a big kick out of the stuff that you put out.
Yeah. I think on like my Bandcamp and stuff, it says lo-fi basement anxiety,
Yes.
which is a pretty accurate description
Yeah.
because, I mean, obviously you can see it is recorded in the basement, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, I see a Jeff Rosenstock flag back there. I see a Ska Against Transphobia flag. You got a pretty solid background going there.
And then,
Love
yeah,
it.
the air hockey table, you know.
Oh, sweet. That's just like screaming 1991 St. Louis to me.
Midwest basement.
I love it. It's a perfect Midwestern basement. It harkens back to my growing up just down the road from you. So I grew up in Fenton, Missouri. You're like you're outside of St. Louis as well. How far away are you from Fenton?
It's probably like 20 minutes or so.
That's insane. I just love how the world is so small, how you were probably one school district over from me growing up. What school district did you go to? Were you at Fox?
I went to actually, my wife's family is in Hillsboro, so we kind of moved back to here. I grew up down in St. Genevieve.
That's where my grandfather grew up.
Okay.
French Village. My grandfather grew up in like the French Village area of Missouri. So the world is so small. This is crazy. Cool. Well, I grew up in the Rockwood School District, which is like just down the street from where you are now. So like where you are right now is essentially, my hometown. And I get a lot of nostalgia sort of talking to you just about this and looking at your basement there, because it reminds me so much of the house that I grew up in. Gets a little emotional, thinking about those times whenever you're young and living in different places and thinking back on the power of life. Kind of reminds me of your Devil's Creek cover that you made for the Propaganda podcast here. You did Devil's Creek.
The adults even less, so I hung out by myself in a back road drainage ditch.
For the show, you did a speculative fiction.
A new iron curtain drawn across the 49th parallel.
Those were some ones that you kind of made very minimalist, very lo-fi versions for the podcast for those episodes, which people can hear if they go listen to them. Tell me a little bit about your process for making a lo-fi basement anxiety rendition of a Propaganda song, because you have a really specific style whenever you send me these covers. It's kind of jarring whenever I hear them the first time.
I think with Devil's Creek was the first one, and kind of the thing that was going through my head, it's like, okay, I can sing this song, okay, but I definitely can't play guitar like Chris or Steve or Todd or John even.
Right.
Or I probably can't even play guitar as well as George. I don't even know if he plays guitar.
He probably does. I wouldn't be surprised if George would just like sit down with a guitar and just blow all of our minds and just be like, whoa.
So I think I was sitting down here one day and just kind of like humming to myself or singing it and just strumming along. And it's like, okay, I didn't even know the chords for it, which I just kind of took it down to like one string. Like, let's just roll on this one string. It's kind of in the right key to fit my voice.
Yeah.
And set my phone here, next to the computer and hit record, and that was it. And that's kind of how it turned out.
I love it how you just basically, so like whenever I think about what you do you remember that band Presidents of the United States of America, who like removed certain strings?
I think they had like 2 strings on a guitar.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
On the other guitar, yeah.
That's kind of what it reminds me of sort of what you do. It feels like whenever you take it down to one single string that you're doing almost like a President of the United States of America sort of approach to these songs. Does that make sense? So, you did Devil's Creek and speculative fiction. You took sort of a similar approach to both of them. But they're very like haunting, very brooding. Do you have a particular favorite one that you did?
I think out of those two, I think Devil's Creek, maybe just because it was the first, and it was kind of like, I don't know, the idea, it hit me and it was like, okay, this is it. This is a great way to, with this set of lyrics, the kind of the, like you're saying, the brooding and the nostalgia and everything kind of coming together.
Yeah, because it's like if you think about a kid who doesn't really play guitar, what do you do when you're a kid and you find a guitar? Like you kind of like jack around on like one string and you kind of like move your like pointer finger up and down the frets. And it's like the first thing that people do when they're learning how to play guitar is you just kind of figure out how to move a finger around on the strings and make different sounds. And to me, that's kind of like really appropriate for making a Devil's Creek cover. So I was kind of struck by it in that regard. You know what? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that is basically what I was doing.
I love it.
Came up with it and was like, okay, this sounds great. Let's hit record.
I love it. Well, and those songs, you have those for download somewhere too on Bandcamp, right?
Yeah, they're on Bandcamp. I think everything that I did all last year, the covers and everything, is all on Bandcamp. The non-covers, the original songs that I did, are on all the streaming services that we like or don't like.
Cool. Yeah. So you also did another thing for the show once where I think we did a This Is Your Life episode where I asked people to do vocal renditions over the instrumental supporting cast demo, and you sent one in. And I got several of those. Yours was the most singy, and I know that you were jacking around a little bit with the speed of the song as well. Like you were talking to me about like changing stuff around. Can you talk a little bit about the process of making your vocal cover for This Is Your Life?
Yeah, with that, I think it was like I was listening to it. I was sitting in my car or something, like on lunch at work, and just listening to the instrumental version, and again, like humming along to it, kind of singing along, going to my head, and because I definitely can't holler like Todd either. That's
right.
No training on anything like that. Completely out of my vocal range, out of my wheelhouse. And I was, singing along with it, and just sort of slipped into the Greg Graffin Bad Religion kind of voice, I guess.
Yeah.
And then was like, okay, maybe we can do something with this. And then I got home and I took the MP3 and I loaded it in on my computer. I was like, well, maybe if I slow it down a little bit and kind of pitch it down, we can do something with it. And I think I posted like a little snippet of that on Instagram or somewhere.
Yeah.
And then I think there were like a couple transitions that I couldn't get the hang of with it being slowed down. So I just gradually kind of worked it back up to speed.
Yeah.
Doing that.
And you have a lot of great oohs and ahs in there, which is a lot of fun. Hey, some hey yas.
Yeah, hey.
Yeah, hey. Yeah, that's right. Hey, yeah, hey, hey, yeah. What am I talking about? Ridiculous over here.
Also a great song, but not quite bad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I'm not even going to edit that out. That's perfectly embarrassing, so I'm leaving it in. Well, Lang, I'm curious about your fandom of Propaganda in general. How'd you get into the band?
So, let's see. The first song of theirs that I ever heard, it was actually, it wasn't, it kind of took me a while to get into them. Because they weren't a band that, like in the 90s, I wasn't into. Because I wasn't really, I had a lot of friends that were, but I wasn't really into the like Epitaph Fat kind of sound. I was sort of like aware of those bands, but it wasn't what I was into. But I'm trying to think of, I'm trying to say, I guess I was into a lot of like older punk rock and stuff like that because it was the stuff that was, you could read more about. I guess, and it was a little bit more available because I had like the Columbia House or like the Sony BMG Music Club.
Yep.
These for $1 or whatever.
Yeah.
And so like all those old records, they were on major labels. So you could order like the Sex Pistols record, or like all the Ramones albums, all the Clash albums, all that kind of stuff. Whereas for some of the other stuff, you had to search a little bit more.
Right.
Which, growing up where I did, in St. John, you had to drive like half an hour to even get to a Walmart.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go to an actual record store, you're looking at like an hour to get into the city, or
Yeah,
even go to the mall.
And like for me, like I grew up in Fenton, and I could go to Streetside Records in Crestwood, or I could go to Vintage Vinyl in U City, or I could like sometimes if I would find myself at the mall, there was the Camelot Music and the Sam Goody at the Crestwood Mall. And like I remember buying Making Friends by No Use for Name at Sam Goody in Crestwood Mall, and it was $16.99.
Yeah.
In like 1998. I mean, it was which is
Now,
what
yeah.
an absurd amount of money then.
Adjusted for inflation, it's like $11 billion for a CD.
Right.
You know. But,
Exactly.
So with all of that, and then I think it was like 1997 or 98, we got a computer, dial-up internet.
Mm-hmm.
In 1999, we got Napster.
Yeah.
That was the like game changer completely.
Nice.
Because then I would go and like I would see a patch on somebody's jacket or like a shirt that somebody was wearing and go like, oh, who's that band?
Yeah.
And then I could go home and, you know, look them up and download a couple of their songs. We're like, oh, this is cool. Oh, I don't like this. Oh, you know. And so something like that kind of really blew my musical exposure out of the water. Just like crazy world opening up, which now we have Spotify and Apple Music and everything else in the world that was like completely unimaginable then. So then after a while, I started getting more into the Fat and the Epitaph kind of stuff, just gradually discovering some of that stuff. And I started buying like the label compilations, you know, all the Punkaramas and the Fat Musics. I had a bunch of like the Hopeless compilations, which I think is the first place I heard the Weaker Thans.
Yeah, nice. Cinema beer goggles.
Mm-hmm. The first Propagandy song that I heard was their cover of True. It was on Fat Music 3.
Awesome.
And that was another one of those. I was like, oh, who's this band? And I didn't really know anything about them other than like the little bit that was in like the booklet for that. And I was kind of aware of them, but I didn't really get into them at first, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2003, I got to college. And now we had like music piracy and high-speed internet and thousands of other people all sharing music. And then it was like everything really opened up.
Wow.
Because I could find people that had these similar interests or that were into, you know, different stuff than me. And it just continue expanding off of that.
Nice. I remember living in the dorms at Mizzou and having people just running LimeWire and Napster like 24 hours a day, downloading content to computers that they would never in a million years have time to consume all of. They were just downloading it just to download it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that sticks out to me because it was like the most egregious example of that. I downloaded every Kiss album, and there's like 4 Kiss songs that I like. It was like, no, I have to download all of their albums because it's there. I have to have it.
I love it. I love it.
No, that was the point where I actually did, which I guess at that point it would have been How to Clean Everything, Less Talk, and Today's Empires.
Mm-hmm.
I got those 3 albums. And How to Clean Everything, I was like, okay, this is all right. I can get behind this. And then Less Talk was the like mind blow, game changer. Okay, these guys are serious. They're speaking about stuff that even if at the time I didn't totally understand it, that clicks with me. And then Today's Empires was like, I'm not ready for this.
Dude, I was the same way, but I was so into Today's Empires, but it was so massive at the time. I couldn't really even process how I felt about it.
And I had like the total opposite reaction. I was like, oh, this isn't anything like, you know, the last two. I don't like this at all. I could have turned into one of those guys that was just like, oh, How to Clean Everything is their only good record. Like that kind of thing. And I remember thinking, it was like, oh, this is too metal. This is too like technical and stuff, which is kind of dumb because at the time, like all of my best friends were metalheads. And I was going to like a lot more metal shows and stuff like that. Like I can go and see like Motorhead and Megadeth and Lamb of God, and then it's like, oh, this Propaganda record is too, you know, that's too much for me. But it took a while for that to like click. But then, let's see. I remember Potemkin City Limits came out, and I think I just didn't think that much of it. They were just kind of off my radar at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But then I remember hearing about Supporting Cast and hearing tracks from that when that came out, and hearing that they had added another guitar player. I was like, okay, this is really where it clicked. So it's kind of Supporting Cast was like the moment where current day Propaganda really clicked for me. And then
Excellent.
Failed States was the like, this is solidifying it. Because I remember seeing the video. There was our new Practice Space video.
Oh yeah, where they played Status Update.
And it was like, this is it. This is just 30 seconds of rager, and it's perfect, and I love it. And that was like completely solidifying the fandom right there.
Do you have a favorite record that you kind of like cling to? Like I'm very open about the fact that my favorite is Supporting Cast, and Keith is very open about the fact that his favorite is Failed States.
I think if somebody just asked me that point blank, I might say Less Talk, but I think that's also the nostalgia talking a little bit. But in terms of like actually everything about it, I think I want to say Victory Lap.
Nice. Cool. That sounds fine with me. That's Chris's favorite. Chris said he feels like it's their best one. So you're in good company there, and there's no arguing against that. Have you seen Propaganda live before?
I haven't. I might be the first or only guest that has said that. I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I don't think you're the only one.
To all of them yet. I'm a little behind.
Nice.
But,
so
I remember when they toured for Victory Lap. I don't remember if it was like 2018, 2019.
Mm-hmm.
I remember they were coming to St. Louis, and I remember looking up the date, and I can't remember if like I couldn't get off work that day, or I had to go into work early, or something like that, where the timing wouldn't have quite worked out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh well, I can just see him again next time, and who knows when, if next time will be.
I tell you what, that is exactly why I made the trip to Winnipeg this past year, because I was like, after the last couple of years with so much in doubt, I was like, I'm gonna go, and if the shows happen, that's great, because they very well may not. And then there's a tour coming up this spring, and I have tickets for Toronto, Guelph, and London, Ontario, and I'm just kind of operating under the assumption that none of those shows will even happen. So if they happen, great. It's a bonus, because it's just an hour down the road for me in the car now. So I'm like, if I have the chance now, I am not missing out anymore.
Yeah.
Because anything can happen.
It was definitely the like, yeah, they'll come through again. It won't be that long. They don't take 5 years between albums or anything. And then my son was born, and then COVID happened, and it's like, okay, eventually, hopefully, it'd be nice.
Yeah. So you and I got to chat. We've been chatting back and forth on Twitter now for like a year and a half, and I sort of like roped you into being a guest on a song that no one else has ever mentioned being interested in doing. And so we're going to talk about I Want You to Want Me, or you could say I Want You to Vant Me.
Yeah.
The cover of Cheap Trick that closes How to Clean Everything. Oh, we got a little bit of Rick Nielsen there. Nice. Very good. Oh, what else we got there? Dude, sweet. So you are a Cheap Trick fan, it looks like, or at least interested. Tell me about your interest in Cheap Trick.
So I can't remember how I first got into Cheap Trick. It was probably one of those things where in the mass downloading of everything that I could possibly see, I, got a few of their albums and just liked them. I've always had kind of an affinity for the little bit poppier, a nice solid 3-minute pop song.
Mm-hmm.
The first favorite band I ever had as a kid was the Beach Boys. And that's something that's kind of always stuck with me. Good pop song, vocal harmonies. There's the Bad Religion connection.
Yeah.
The Oohs and Ahs and Haze. But I don't know. They're just a band that I've liked for a while, and it seemed like a good song to cover.
Yeah, well, and I mean, they're just down the road from St. Louis. They're, a Chicago band, so there's a little bit of appreciation, So we've got this song, I Want You to Want Me, and I just listened to it once before you and I got on the phone a little bit ago. And my first impressions here is that we have sort of 3 sections, right? We have the cover of Cheap Trick. Then we have the vegan Megan who won't eat bacon part. And then we have the chorus of fucks.
Yeah.
And I know that you have spent a lot of time with this song having deep contemplative meditations in regards to
that playlist.
Yeah.
It was just that song over and over.
Yeah. So you just need to explain to everybody what kind of realizations or you've had about this song in the recent days.
So after listening to this over and over and over and over, this is something that's going to sound obvious when I say it, but it's not really a straightforward cover.
Mm-hmm.
Like other covers that they've done, like the COC, Technocracy. It's a little more faithful to the original song, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But the I Want You to Want Me, besides the structure and that kind of stuff, they changed some of the lyrics, which is something that stuck out. The chorus kind of section in the original Cheap Trick song, I'll shine out my old brown shoes, I'll put on a brand new shirt, I'll get home early from work if you say that you love me.
Mm.
And then Propaganda doesn't say that. They say, I'll buy a brand new shirt, put on brand new shoes, I'll do anything if you say that you love me.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that kind of popped into my head was it feels like in the Propaganda version, it's a little more, I got some notes here. It's a little more pining for the other person,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the Cheap Trick one sounds like it's more in the context of an existing relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Which then you have the oh Megan, those kind of parts also.
Mm-hmm.
And then the I would do anything, they're focusing on well, what can I do to impress you that will make you say that you love me? Which next to a song like this might be satire.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the I'm gonna do all of these things for you so that I can get you to say that you love me and I can try and fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
So that was okay, this isn't just them totally goofing around. This is actually fits into the context of the record a little bit.
Nice.
But that was just sort of where it clicked for me. It's okay, this is not quite as stupid as I thought previously.
Yeah. And I was listening to it earlier, and for the last year and a half, I have been extraordinarily flippant with regards to this song.
Mhm.
I have songs that I like talk about, which I like just, brush off. But the song also, it kind of rages as well. Like the performance is actually really amazing.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh goodness, this is a lot better than I actually thought it was. And
Mhm.
maybe I should, talk less trash about it.
Yeah. Apparently, I don't remember where I heard it or if my brain just made it up. I think it was like one of the songs that they played when Fat Mike went to see him that was like, no, this has to be, you have to have this on the record. This is like the thing that made him want to sign them. I don't know if that's all the way true or if I like mixed that up from somewhere else, but it's like, okay, somebody saw something in this. It wasn't
Yeah.
just totally a, tossed off kind of a goof.
Yeah. Well, and what's really interesting too is that there's not a whole lot of stuff on how to clean everything about meat and veganism and food. And like, so that middle part, the second part of the song of she don't eat bacon, she don't eat the cute little. Exactly. I was like, holy cow, this is actually on it aligned with the band's like vision of the world. Like this middle section, which just sounds hilarious,
Yeah,
is like
maybe the worst forced rhyme in
yeah.
a song that they've ever done. The Megan vegan bacon.
Yeah, vegan. I think that don't they say vegan in it?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that was definitely a bit of a leap there. But what do you think about that middle part? Because it's kind of funny because you can really pick out all their voices too. And John was actually doing like some low harmony in there, and I was like, this is really fascinating as well.
Oh. I don't. God, I can't get off of that horrible rhyme.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Really, it's really bad and it's really funny.
And then we have the chorus of fucks like that just take us out for like the last like 15 or 20 seconds here, and I'm just like, oh my god, like it's really one of the most cringe inducing.
You can tell they were still like 20-ish years old when they did it. So that's the sort of thing that's really clever and funny when you're 20 years old making a punk record.
Yeah, exactly. It was a very it feels like it feels like if you just snipped that section and popped it on the end of Dude Ranch by Blink-182, I mean, it's just like would be totally seamless, which is yeah, it's just kind of surreal to me thinking about how what the seriousness of the content of so many of the songs of the band and having that be like on the end of that record. It just kind of blows me away. Well, do you have any other thoughts on this song? Any particular theories or any other stories or anything like that that you wanted to share while I've got you on the phone here?
As far as the song goes, no, not really. That was like the big theory that kind of hit me. Like
I love it.
Somebody smarter than me could probably do a lot more with it, but I think it's a good starting point. It kind of takes it from like a no doubt slam dunk 1 out of 5 terrible song. Why is this on here? Guaranteed skip to like, okay, this fits. It makes some sort of sense in context, even if it doesn't perfectly land. 2 out of 5, at least.
Okay.
Like a soft 2.
I will take your rating into consideration when Keith and I make the episode.
Okay.
I will maybe we'll do a 3-way calculation where we'll add up all of our numbers and then divide it by 3 instead of by 2, since you have lodged an official ranking for the song. You've been listening to this podcast for so long.
I think just about since I think the first time I heard about you guys was when Propaganda like retweeted you or reposted something like after like the 3rd or 4th episode. Something like that. So just about from the beginning, yeah.
How has the journey been? I'm just so curious.
It's been good. Like I said, I'm still kind of behind. Skip around a little bit. It's been good. It's been intimidating sometimes. I think I still have about 3 hours to go on the Potemkin episode.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's great. It's really good, but it's, I don't know, it's a learning experience. It's, it's funny. It's intimidating sometimes.
Ugh.
It's even more for you guys, I'm sure.
It's insane. I mean, I added up how much time Keith and I spent on the Potemkin City Limits episode, like with booking guests, recording interviews, researching and like making our notes, and then recording together, and then editing the episode, including downloading like the musical clips and stuff like that, and editing and all that stuff. And it was like 70 hours
Oh god.
of like combined human labor to make the episode, and it's just like ridiculous to me. And the fact that I just like keep doing it is just like super overwhelming. Like I stay up until like 1 o'clock in the morning making this thing. It's just bonkers. Ugh. Well, I'm glad that you have found it, and I'm glad that you like it, and I'm glad that you keep participating and making covers and coming to hang out with me, and talking to me from my hometown and getting me all nostalgic for St. Louis. But Lang, I'm really grateful that you're here. Can you just remind folks where they can find your tunes if they want to, go and listen to some stuff and, download those covers and, listen to your other stuff as well?
Okay, so everything that I've recorded is on Bandcamp.
Mhm.
It's all pay what you want or pay nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's doublehelldethmatch.bandcamp.com.
Yep.
There's also on all the main streaming services, whichever one you use, it's probably on there. Double
Yeah.
Hell Deathmatch.
What's All right. Thank you to Lang Huck. Thank you to Rory Phillips for your fantastic company and chatting about propaganda, chatting about I Want You to Want Me. Keith, what do you say we dive in on the lyrics here, and we'll get really crazy.
All right, Greg. It says here, I want you to want me. I need you to need me. I'd love you to love me. I'm begging you to beg me.
So this I'd love you to love me in this first one. This is an interesting detail because it's a difference between the original and Propaganda's version. So, what's interesting is that the lyrics are differently performed slightly than the original in a few spots, and Chris changes some of the order of the vocal delivery, which Rory also discussed in his interview. So if you play the two versions side by side, this is not a true to the original cover, which I kind of like. As far as the meaning of the lyrics, my first instinct is to bag on this lyric because I think about how, but then I think about, I'm trying to like rephrase my worldview here sometimes. Instead of automatically critiquing something, I'm trying to be like, okay, let me think about this from multiple perspectives. So then I think about the fact that this song is about like wanting to feel like your company is necessary in a relationship, and how nice it is that another person wants you around. That's seriously what so many of us are missing in this life is intimacy and company with people that want you there. And so while this song can be easily interpreted as creepy, I could go down that path if I wanted to. Today, I'm feeling a little sentimental and acknowledge that feeling wanted is an essential piece of human intimacy. And it feels good when you feel wanted and desired in a relationship.
Yeah, Greg, I think hopefully we get better at expressing that need of feeling wanted and feeling needed. And our comments, our text messages, the things that we say don't still sound like Taking Back Sunday lyrics when we're in our 40s, right?
Oh boy.
My wife tells me all the time that I need to find ways to understand and know that I am loved and needed, that I also need to be able to learn to tell myself that without relying on it from others, because it's not always easy. It's not always practical for to have like sort of constant affirmations from people, and I'm a very needy person. So I think my own thought with this lyric is very in line with yours, and how I'm just thinking out of my personal, like where I am right now. But so I agree with my wife that I need to be able to tell myself that. I agree with you totally that it also is just feels good to feel needed sometimes. And I don't necessarily see this lyric or this song as a whole as being, I guess, literal, as being like someone who says these things and thinks they're good things. I guess maybe I'll wait to a couple lyrics to share that, but there's a contradiction in this first part, in that reciprocated love like shouldn't require demands. Those things happen through work and communication, effort, commitment. But when you're young, you don't really see that. You just want someone else to feel the same way that you do, especially when they don't.
Yeah.
That feels even worse, and it almost amplifies your own feeling. And when it's not requited. So the love here maybe is more desire, and the desire actually is also demand. I think it represents a young, naive version of love that most people probably have experienced.
Yeah.
But maybe you don't really see that it's like a naive version of love until you're a little older, or you're in a relationship that is more honest, and it is reciprocated.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that makes a song resonate across a wide and large audience, is if people can see themselves within the song often. And I would hope that we all have, that most of us listening have had the experience of having somebody love you and want you around. But that's far from a guarantee. But I would say that everybody probably has had the feeling of wanting somebody who doesn't want you back in the same way, and how confusing and challenging that can be. And then we have this part that goes into then is "I want you now, yeah," which Chris adds in this version.
I wouldn't even known it was different.
Yeah. And I mean, I listened to both of them like back to back several times. Like that's how ridiculous I get with this stuff. And then he says, "I want you to want me. I need you to need me. I'm begging you to beg me. I'd love you to love me." So I love the little spin on the original there, where the band puts in something new just to kind of like differentiate it and give it a little bit of a twist. But then we have this next one: "Buy a brand new shirt, put on brand new shoes. I would do anything if you'd say that you love me." And the thing I don't like about this part is the almost bargaining to do what the other person says, and maybe living inauthentically or being what you're not in order to please some kind of standard foisted upon you by another person. Or it could be maybe it isn't foisted. Maybe you're foisting it upon yourself because you think that's what the other person wants, even if they maybe haven't even said that. And I understand the desire to improve oneself and consistently try to be a better person and everything. But I think the desire to do those things should come from within, instead of out of something done in a bid to impress someone that may in the long run turn out not to be a good match. So I think those desires should come from within, for the desire to improve oneself solely for oneself. And if the people around you benefit from your efforts at self-improvement, all the better. But the real person will eventually reemerge, which is maybe a problem. anybody out there listening may have done some things that you think the other person wanted you to do. And then in time, your true self reemerges and you
Right.
start behaving in your natural way again. And you may stop doing the things that you were, doing inauthentically to impress the person at the beginning, but then you stop doing those things because they're not really who you are. And so, maybe that new shoes, maybe that new shirt persona will slip away over time because it wasn't done authentically,
Oh yeah, Greg. I mean, I agree with all of that. And I also think about that lyric, I keep asking myself, like, is this satire? Like, this might be satire, right? Is this
Yeah.
like an earlier version that's kind of poking fun at all of this?
And it could be.
Yeah. Like it has this very kind of, I don't know, proto pop punk, proto poppy rock feel to it, not only in its, the sound, but also in the lyrical themes and the sort of self-pity that is all throughout it. But part of me has to think like, man, you're not serious, right? Like this, you're, I mean, like I said, I agree with what you said about authenticity in a relationship. And I've not been in many, maybe 2.5, which doesn't really make sense. But, I know from those relationships that the best intimate and personal connections with others not only allow you to be yourself, but they also challenge you to evolve and support you in becoming a better version of yourself. So it's not just about changing what you do to fit someone else's needs or desires or wants, but changing yourself to just to be a better person.
What do you think about the Megan? What do you think about that part?
I mean, if it wasn't satire before, then I think for sure it is now.
Yeah, I get a kick out of it. Then we have this didn't die, see you crying. Didn't die, see you crying. Sitting alone, I know you felt like dying. Didn't die, see you crying. So I'm not really sure I get this line. I don't really know if I understand what it means. If he wants the woman to want him, but he sees her sitting, perhaps upset over a breakup with another guy, is he seeking to swoop in and be the hero to soothe the broken heart? And that's what I'm wondering about, is like, I'm not really sure I get it.
Yeah, me neither. But I will say, like, for not really being a fan too much of the cover or the original song, that way that is phrased and that is performed is so catchy and memorable. Reading the lyrics looks really silly, but just that really iconic performance just has this great like rock and roll pop feel to it that I have to tip my hat to, even if I'm not the biggest fan.
Dude, and I was jacking around with this song on my acoustic guitar here in my little butler's pantry home office that I've got going on here. And the way that line rolls off the tongue when you're kind of in the groove of the song, where it's sitting alone, I know you felt like dying. It just comes out and it's so natural and smooth. So I am 100% with you on that, because I couldn't believe how, when I kind of got into it and I was kind of feeling it, like when I was playing guitar and singing it, how that line is easily my favorite part of the whole song to actually sing.
Same.
So yeah, I love that you pointed out the catchy pop sensibility of that particular line, because it is strong. And then we have this, I want you to want me. I need you to beep, need me. I'm begging you to beg me. I'd love you to love me. And I love the beep. I love that it's like a radio edit to add some humor to where he could have added some emphasis swearing. But that beeped out section is so funny because, it's kind of like that part on like that No Effects song, please play this song on the radio.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. That's funny.
Because it's like, hey, I've got this song that really could go well on playing like a major rock station. Look, we even added the beep in for you. But then the end of the song goes into that massive chorus of fucks. So it's like if the DJ is discerning and they know to turn it off in time, you can legitimately play this song on the radio. But if you don't, you're going to get it. And then you're going to be the DJ who aired like 57 swears in a row on the radio. So I thought that part was super funny. Did you have any thoughts on the beep out?
No, the same thing. I thought of that No Effects song. That's funny.
So buy a brand new shirt, put on brand new shoes. Cheap Trick reverses that. I would do anything if you say that you love me. So I love the fact that Chris is like flipping the vocals around and just kind of toying with it to like experiment with the vocal delivery a little bit. And then they scream, Megan, before they go into the ripping section. So I love this. When they get into the fast part, they go into the didn't I see you crying part, but then they get into this, oh yeah, and then it's like this 9 seconds of just Chris screaming yeah and just holding it straight, and I absolutely love that part, and it's my favorite part of the Propaganda version, for sure. But when the I want you to want me part ends, they get into an original Propaganda section.
Megan, she don't eat bacon. She never killed a sweet little innocent piggy to get bacon.
Megan, she don't eat bacon. She'd never kill a sweet little innocent piggy to get bacon. She's one of them vegans. She's a sweet loving, sweet talking, lovable vegan. And that's all right. So I got a chuckle out of rhyming vegan with bacon.
Yeah, right.
They say vegan, bacon. And I love how George seems to be doing the high parts and John's backing vocals on the acapella, and like the high part seems to be George. So like, I feel like George's doing the high vocals there. But, Chris talks about the chorus of fucks on his Patreon and how they all thought it was dumb, but how he concedes that Fat Mike was basically a marketing genius in early 90s punk because people heard it and loved it. But as we all know today, it's pretty ridiculous. But back then, he was like, people ate it up. So Fat Mike was right. But I love how this Megan part is snuck into the song because it connects those earlier Megans in the song where he's like, oh, Megan, kiss, and then Megan. Because then we find out later on that Megan is the vegan that the person singing is into. So it kind of brings the story full circle to the Megan parts and the Cheap Trick part. But I also love that this is a section where animal activist awareness is on this record in sort of an unexpected way, because animal activism is not a major focal point on this record.
Yeah, right.
Animals and species discussions isn't really a huge focal point in the lyrics on How to Clean Everything. I mean, Hate Myth Muscle Etiquette says status symbols yield to respect between sex, species, environment. That's really the only other mention I can think of off the top of my head in relation to the lyrics on How to Clean Everything. with regards to animals and speciesism. So if you think about it like that, it's sort of, in a way, kind of a preview of things to come, where they open up the next record with apparently I'm a PC fascist because I care about both human and non-human animals, and then go straight into nailing Descartes to the wall. So this Megan the vegan part is like ending this record, and then they go right into PC fascist at the start of the next record. So there's my wild theory is that they ended with some animal activism because the next record is so animal activism heavy, you know?
Right. Yeah. I don't know if I ever realized that the animal rights aspect of the band's approach and lyrics isn't really found here. I think, just knowing it's everywhere elsewhere throughout their career. But maybe I just absently assumed it was here as well and just never picked up on it, or forgot, or mistakenly thought so. Sort of a what is it, a Mandela effect of propaganda, I guess, thinking there's an animal rights song on here.
Dude, I think this might be the most animal heavy portion of the whole record is Megan the vegan. I mean, so that's pretty wild, man. Pretty wild. And maybe I'm wrong and I'm just having an insanely huge brain fart, but it's been a long day. So that very well may be true. But yeah, this is a pretty, I'm like, oh, wow, interesting that we have this vegan activism section tacked onto the end of the cover. So in that way, it's actually a really endearing section of the song when you think about where the band would go next, and then how little of that there is in the earlier portions of this record. So I thought that was pretty cool, man. So let's talk a little bit about the music. If you want to know about the musicality, instruments, the recording process of this tune, you cannot do better to learn about the specifics of that than to listen to Chris's Patreon episode on Haile Selassie, which is episode 2 on his Patreon. And there he talks about trying to record guitar with Brett Gerwitz's Telecaster and much more about the recording of how to clean everything. And it's definitely worth a re-listen. And you mentioned that Bad Brains section earlier. That was some intense stuff, man. Re-listening to that again. Right. But remember, when Chris tells his stories on his podcast, he's the Mars rover on the surface, and we're a couple of fellows looking through telescopes, making theories and speculating from afar just for fun. But as far as guitar goes, I love the chugging guitar under the Didn't I See You Crying, the fast part of the song, where it's like da-da-da. I just love that. I love the drums, and something that I had forgotten when I was listening to Chris's Haile Selassie episode is that he talks a lot about the recording of George's drums and how George did 2 takes of Anti-Manifesto on drums, but then most of the other songs on this record are single takes, which is honestly incredible. So I presume this performance of I Want You to Want Me is George's first take. And Chris said on his Patreon that they didn't use a click track, which is how my high school band recorded too. But my high school band didn't write what went on to become a classic of the genre. But Jord is awesome on this song as always. And to think about this being a first go at the recording, amazing.
That's really cool.
And I love the cursing bleep in the vocals. I love the despair-driven scream of Megan before the fast part. And I love that long yeah from 150 to 159. And, in my approximation, that substitutes a bit of the guitar lick solo by Rick Nielsen in the original Cheap Trick version. So, yeah, those are some of my thoughts on the music.
Well, Greg, I mean, we already said you were wrong about the Saxon reference, but that scream of Megan has to be a reference to Slayer's Angel of Death, right? I mean that is Tom Araya's iconic scream at the beginning of Rain and Blood. And maybe I never noticed that before until this week, if I just didn't make the connection. But listening again this week, I was like, okay, that has to be a Slayer reference though.
it is 100% fact that was inspired by Tom Araya from Slayer. It is a fact. There's no speculation here. I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's that's definitely a great theory. So I was looking around online and I found a band covering Propagandy's version. So I figured I'd throw a clip in here real quick. And this is a clip from a band called Side Effects performing this song live in 2008. And it sounds pretty good. So here's what it sounds like. All right. Well, Keith, I found some YouTube comments. Did you find any YouTube comments?
No, what do you got?
I got some one here. It says, this CD was a constant in high school right around the same time. So many carefree memories of friends, parties, shenanigans, etc. Really miss it.
That's almost like every How to Clean Everything comment.
Yeah.
They're all like that.
They're all like, we're partying, man. And I'm like, you were listening to Stick the Fucking Flag Up Your Ass? Right. Like, and that, like, you're looking back on that, like, that's like some big party anthem.
Doing a keg stand.
It's amazing. Somebody else said, this is the best version of this song.
Mm.
Somebody else said, brings back memories of high school.
See, there you go.
And then somebody else said, now this is how you do a secret track. And then somebody else said, wow, this is terrible. So, you know, I got some takeaway thoughts on this one. This is a song that I don't really care a whole heck of a lot about, but it's not nearly as bad as it was in my imagination.
Yeah.
When we started this podcast, this is one of the ones where I was like, oh God, that Cheap Trick cover. And I was hating on it for sure, but I hadn't listened to it in years before I talked to Lang because, you know, I've often like not really cared that this song exists. And I know that Chris likely wishes that we wouldn't even have acknowledged that this song exists, but it sneaks in some vegan awareness. It mixes up the vocal delivery, so it isn't exactly a true to the original cover. And George slays it on what seems to be a first take drum performance. So I'm going to cut this one some slack because clearly it was influential in getting some folks to pay attention to the band. And heck, it's even still given attention today.
Right.
I went to some of their streaming services, and on one popular streaming service, this is their 38th most streamed song. And in that number 38, it was ahead of Note to Self, Last Will and Testament, Adventures in Zoochosis, Fixed Frequencies, Die Jugend marschiert, Rock for Sustainable Capitalism, Devil's Creek, Lotus Gate, Back to the Motor League, and more.
I'm nauseated.
So I Want You to Vaunt Me is ahead of all of those amazing songs, which are basically fives, like perfect songs. I Want You to Vaunt Me is ahead of them in the rankings on streaming, which is wild. So
yeah. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug, huh?
Oh, yeah. And, you know, I also think about the symbolic nature of this song as the closer on the record. So think about the other closers in Propagandy's catalog: Refusing to Be a Man, Purina Hall of Fame, Iteration, Last Will and Testament, Duplicate Keys of Caro, and Adventures in Zoochosis. You can feel that the band truly didn't believe there would be another record after this one, because for a band with such an iconic array of spot on closers, to have this as the closer of the first record, you can tell that when they say that we didn't really think there'd be a second record, that they mean it. because I feel like this band takes their closers so seriously throughout the rest of their records that like they thought that this was like a one-off and they were just going to go back to Winnipeg and never be heard from again. So that's kind of interesting to me. But I thought today about having Who Will Help Me Bake This Bread as the closer, and I thought that was pretty cool. But imagine having You Can Rearrange My Face, but you can't rearrange my mind as the lyric on the last song on the record. I'm into it. But Chris said on Patreon about what it means to, be in one's 40s or whatever, and have people look back on these early days recordings as being on one's permanent record, And I heard something else recently. I was listening to a podcast episode about 9 Inch Nails, and it reminded me of a quote from Trent Reznor where he was talking about the Pretty Hate Machine record. He said, it's one thing when you're sitting in your bedroom thinking no one will ever hear this. And after several years, millions of people have bought the record, and now they think they know you. And in a weird way they do, because that's my innermost feelings laid out. So I'm not saying that I Want You to Want Me is that for Chris, but I think about the context, the time, the place of this record often, especially since I've said that it isn't my favorite Propaganda record. Maybe sometimes I get a tad too intense on the show, critiquing it or whatever. But it's interesting to think about the time and the place and how this record becomes an iconic piece of these people's permanent record. It's decades later, and it's ahead on streaming services of like all the songs that they really want us to listen to. But I love this band, even the stuff I don't like. So I'm giving this one some slack. And I definitely think everybody should go back and listen to Chris's storytelling about this record on that Highly Celeste episodes on his Patreon. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, Greg, although it's a cover, it to me very much has a feel of a novelty song here. It's a little gimmicky. I think a track that is reflective of the band's earlier career and doesn't represent them on a longer timeline. It is catchy. It has some silly elements that are a break from the rest of the record. There are parts that are funny, but I would rather have Pigs Will Pay, Government Cartoons, or Oka.
Agree.
Than this song. I don't think I have any big takeaway from the lyrics themselves. I love your takeaway about, including the song and rethinking and trying to look at it as a whole, even if, you're aware that it's, not your favorite track or you're not your favorite record. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have any lesson from the lyrics that I didn't already share. I'm not necessarily a fan of Cheap Trick. I don't dislike them, but I've heard this so much that I'm probably good forever hearing this one. To me, it just is a little repetitive. It's so repetitive. I think it seems derivative, and perhaps it was something new in its time. This earlier poppy rock that doesn't sound too different from a lot of pop punk that would ultimately come decades later. So it's easy for me to lump it in with those things and not see it for something unique at the time. But, I think of this as a mixtape song. Like you'd throw in a collection of tracks for a friend in the 90s, or you download this from Napster or LimeWire, and all the details would be mislabeled, and it would actually say it was No Effects or something rather than another band. I don't have any nostalgic connection to this track, so it doesn't really remind me of my teenage years like it does for others, but I totally get how others could hear this and be transported back to their youth of the early 90s or the mid to late 70s when the original version came out.
Yeah, I agree. We usually don't really rank covers here. But if we were going to rank it, it would probably be a 1, obviously. It's not a song that I have as one I look forward to listening to when I put on the band. I wouldn't want to see this live. And it's goofy stuff made by a band whose next record opened with them apparently I'm a PC fascist, which is pretty wild to think about.
Right.
I am interested to see what would be interesting is like if Ska Sucks and this song I Want You to Want Me weren't on How to Clean Everything, how that would have maybe changed the trajectory of that record's sales or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great question.
You know, if this song wasn't on there, and Ska Sucks wasn't on there, I wonder how much different this record would have performed, you know, economically or whatever. But you know, for me, I put this on a list of tunes that played a role in my life at a certain time and place. But when you think about the power of the rest of their closers, Refusing, Purina, Iteration, Last Will, Duplicate Keys, Zoocosis, this doesn't feel like as if they left everything they had on the field with this record on that closer like those other records do, where it's like a stamp on the record. So that's kind of a missed opportunity for me, is they didn't have the chance to leave their stamp on this record because, you know, maybe they were talked into putting a Cheap Trick cover on it. And to their credit, they didn't think there would be another record, most likely. So I'm glad they took a few creative and fun liberties with it, switched the lyrical delivery a little bit, put in the vegan part, but overall, obviously, in the canon of Propaganda, this isn't the most amazing one, but I sure as heck had a good time chatting about it with you, Keith.
Yeah, Greg, I'm going to say probably the same thing. I'll say a 1. And I like your reminder of the context of the time, not only what's happening in California, what's happening on Fat Records, what's happening with the band specifically and what they see is going on. So it's easy to look back and maybe critique, but you know, the song was fun for a lot of people, and I'm glad it was a fun song for some people. So yeah, I will give it a 1 as well, but I definitely had fun chatting about it.
Nice. Well, as always, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at PropagandaPod. You can email us at propagandapod@gmail.com. Thanks again to Rory Phillips from the Impossibles and the Stereo for the fabulous conversation. Thanks to Lang Huck, not only for the great conversation this time around, but also for the past covers in the Speculative Fiction and Devil's Creek episodes. And we'll be back next time. So thank you so much for listening, and talk to you soon.